we stopped with these lines, and I just thought that we could read an experience of the mother which completely relates to this, because they are prophetic lines. A day may come when she must stand unhelped on a dangerous brink of the world's doom and hers, carrying the world's future on her lonely breast, carrying the human hope in a heart left soul, to conquer or fall, to conquer or fail on a last desperate verge, alone with death and close to extinction's edge. Her single greatness in that last dire scene must cross alone a perilous bridge in time and reach an apex of world destiny where all is won or all is lost for man. This line, some people, well, it's a way of seeing, interpret as, the 17th November event, 1973 event, that this when the mother faced this extinction's words, and well, she left the body. This is a very superficial way to look at the whole thing. Now, in agenda itself, she speaks of the last fight, and if you read it, this is exactly a description, almost a graphic description. She uses the word last fight. Nowhere else this thing occurs in agenda, and its consequences, what follows thereafter. There is a background to this, that several times she has been threatened and attacked by forces, seen and unseen. And then once, this is 3rd April 1962. After several weeks of a grave illness which threatened mother's life, so then she relates an experience in which she discovered that there are a group of people who want to create a kind of religion based on the revelation of Sri Aurobindo. This is often quoted, but with different meaning in different context, trying to put it anywhere. But that's not what it is. If you read through the agenda, it's very clear. So the mother clarifies, but they have taken only the side of power and force. A certain kind of knowledge and all that could be utilized by Asuric forces. So they basically, like the Titan, they just simply the power. There is nothing like surrender, nothing like wisdom. And more importantly, they create a division between mother and Sri Aurobindo. So this also she brings out. There is a big Asuric being that has succeeded in taking the appearance of Sri Aurobindo. This appearance of Sri Aurobindo has declared to me that the work I am doing is not his. So it has gone to this extent of it creates a division. The task of this Asura, he was there in some way or the other even during Sri Aurobindo's time. And he would create division in the minds of people, and they would start wondering whether mother is really divine, who is the mother, why the mother, and they used to write letters to Sri Aurobindo, and at one place Sri Aurobindo says this categorically, that, because the person says, after all it's mother, so what does it matter? The real mother is the world mother. Maybe in India there is a whole tradition of mother, so why this mother? And Sri Aurobindo says, beware of an adverse hostile Maya, which creates a division between this mother and that mother. So there are so many letters to that effect. And he tries to create a division that Sri Aurobindo is the one and mother is a disciple of, in so many ways it comes, mother is a disciple of Sri Aurobindo. Despite Sri Aurobindo writing, the mother is not a disciple of Sri Aurobindo and she had all her realizations. There are plenty of things there, but let's not get into that. But he is without knowledge. He does not know what kind of being is there. And he always hopes to make this being accept me, believing it is truly Sri Aurobindo. This being I saw last night. Now, there is something very touching after this, which follows. What love she embodied. And that would explain to us why mother goes face to face with death and struggles to change him. She could have annihilated, but she waits for that moment. But I must say that I was fully conscious, aware of everything, knowing that an Asuric force was there, but not rejecting it because of the infinity of Sri Aurobindo. Her love. At one place he says, the disciple asks, not here elsewhere, that why didn't you just simply annihilate it? He says, what could I do? He had taken the form of Sri Aurobindo. Only the Divine Mother can embody that love. He had taken the form of Sri Aurobindo. He knew it. What a cunning and deception. That this way, she will, because the form is there in the front, he has taken the appearance of Sri Aurobindo and said, because of the infinity of Sri Aurobindo, she does not reject him. I knew that everything is part of him, part of Sri Aurobindo. And I do not want to reject anything. What a difference. I woke at 12, remembering everything. Between 12:15 and 2, I was with the true Sri Aurobindo, in the fullest and sweetest relation. There also in perfect consciousness, awareness, calm and equanimity. During this time, her heart got seriously affected and she was on the verge of what can be called as physical death. And she says, they would have liked me dead years ago. It is they who are responsible for these attacks on my life. Up till now I am alive because the Lord wanted me to be alive. Otherwise I would have gone long ago. Now imagine the mother could cure people's heart ailments like this. There is a whole story of Prithvi Singh Nahar. It's documented, a letter where when he had severe pain, chest pain, obviously a heart attack, he prayed to mother and sees two tall beings, identical, very fair, very handsome, carrying a bag on their backs and like a backpack, and they come smiling to him and they start taking the bag out. And Prithvi Singh Nahar tells them, no, you come near me only if mother has sent you, not otherwise. And then they smiled and then they entered into his heart, and from the bag they took out some aushadhi, some herbs, and started massaging his heart, and then they came out. Obviously it's a whole occult phenomena. And then he felt completely cured. So he wrote to mother, were they the Ashwin Kumars whom you sent? Because he could connect. Were they the Ashwin Kumars, the physician of the gods? Mother said, yes, I heard your prayer. And I immediately asked them to rush to your help. Now imagine Ashwin Kumars are physician of the gods and they can easily cure any heart ailment. They normally don't meddle with human beings because they are not meant for that. They are highly qualified. Not just MD, DM, but God knows, DG, doctorate in God's health, God-like health, DGH. So they don't, earthly play, they don't have to meddle with it because they don't want to disturb the balance. But they come. They came because mother sent. But here is what mother is saying. When she had a seemingly heart problem, she was on the verge of death. She just leaves it to the Supreme Lord. She doesn't call them. And then she says, I am no more in my body. This is extinction's verge. I have left it for the Lord to take care of it, to decide if it is to have the supramental or not. I know and I have said also that now is the last fight. 3rd April 1962. If the purpose for which this body is alive is to be fulfilled, that is to say, the first steps towards the supramental transformation, so specific sees, then it will continue today. This is the Lord's decision. I am not even asking what He has decided. If the body is incapable of bearing the fight, if it has to be dissolved, then humanity will pass through a critical time. We just read that. Carrying in herself the world's destiny, the hope where all is won or lost for man. So if she would die, then dissolve, the body is dissolved. Now, of course, she would. But if the body is dissolved at that time, she says, then humanity will have to pass through a very critical time. What the Asuric force that has succeeded in taking the appearance of Sri Aurobindo will create is a new religion or thought, perhaps cruel and merciless. Wherever there is cruelty, wherever there is mercilessness, we should be very, very careful in the name of the supramental realization. But everybody must know that it is not true. It is not Sri Aurobindo's teaching, not the truth of his teaching. So what is Sri Aurobindo's teaching? She reveals very beautifully. The truth of Sri Aurobindo is a truth of love and light and mercy. He is good and great and compassionate and divine. And it is He who will have the final victory. How beautiful it is. Sri Aurobindo's teaching is a teaching of truth of love and light. He is good and great and compassionate and divine. And then we may wonder, Mother, can we help? Of course, now it's crossed over, but at that point of time, if we were to ask, some people may have aspired, Mother, such a last fight, can we like Arjuna chip in? So what does she say? Now, individually, if you want to help, you have only to pray. That's what Nirodha says, that when asked Mother says, it's only up to him. Pray to him. It's strange. It's up to him. So pray to him. She said, you can pray. What the Lord wants will be done. Whatever He wills, He will do with this body, which is a poor thing. The fight is within the body. This can't go on. They must be defeated or this body is defeated. All depends on what the Lord will decide. This is extinction's verge. Perils. It is the battlefield. How far it can resist, I don't know. She's completely identified at that moment with the body. After all, it depends on Him. He knows if the time has come or not. The time for the beginning of the victory, then the body will survive. If not, in any case, my love and consciousness will be there. So this also she assured at that point of time in a written document that if something happens to me tonight or in the next couple of days, then don't think I am gone. My love and consciousness will be there. But the body would have gone and humanity will pass through a critical time. But fortunately, by grace, this is 3rd April 62. She notes an experience on the night of 12th April 1962. And here she passes to the other side. This experience many of us may have read. So quickly I'll go through. Suddenly in the night I woke with the full awareness of what we could call the yoga of the world. The supreme love was manifesting through big pulsations. And each pulsation was bringing the world further in its manifestation. Both these experiences are there in her collected works, volume 15. And then she says, and there was the certitude that what is to be done is done, and that the supramental manifestation is realized. So on 3rd April she says, it's the crucial time, this is the last fight. If today it survives, it survives. In 10 days' time, the tables are turned. And then she says something very interesting. Everything was impersonal. This was going on and on and on and on. The certitude that what is to be done is done. All the results of the falsehood had disappeared. Death was an illusion. Sickness was an illusion. Ignorance was an illusion. Something that had no reality, no existence. Only love and love and love and love. Immense, formidable, stupendous, carrying everything. And how to express it in the world? It was like an impossibility because of the contradiction. But then it came, you have accepted that the world should know the supramental truth, and it will be expressed totally, integrally. Yes, yes, and the thing is done. Again she says, so will it be, and the thing is done. And our consciousness is the same, absolutely the same as that of the Lord. There was no difference, no difference. And then she later on commented further on this experience, that after this experience, she says very clearly that up till 13th April, she says, all the experiences that she had on this side. So she says, on this side I had known everything, death and everything, but on this side. But after this experience, she says that I have crossed over to the other side. I know death being in the domain of death, where she has already gone now to start the transformation process. And she says that I am she explains it very paradoxically at one place. She says, I am like a dead person living on earth. She says, I see differently, hear differently. My whole body is different, but nobody is able to know and understand and experience it. All this is there in great detail. So this critical moment, perilous verge, is not 1973. It is 1962. It's a momentous event. We talk about 56. It's a great event. 1962 event was an equally momentous event. And another momentous event was 1969, 1st January. But that's some other time, the occasion for this. So this is where we read her single greatness in that last dire scene. Alone, carrying the world's future on her lonely breast, carrying the human hope in a heart left soul, to conquer or fail on a last desperate verge, alone with death and close to extinction's edge, her single greatness in that last dire scene must cross alone a perilous bridge in time. Nobody can go there while being in the body. There are interesting stories about it. Somebody asked a master, can you tell us about death? He said, no, I don't know. He said, why? You know everything. He said, no, because I am still a living master. I can't tell you about death. Even Sri Aurobindo casually, passingly made such a remark in the evening talks, where he says that I am not yet dead. I have not yet gone through that. But here is mother who says consciously, it's a perilous bridge in time. Nobody can cross and yet have this body. But this experience she was prepared for. Her body was prepared for this. 3 times in her life she had experienced what is called as death. Once when the entire cord was snapped. Once when she goes far beyond and the body, she says for days and even weeks, the body continued every activity. Speaking, eating, everything. This is when she was in Algeria. And she says, that's why I know. But that time she had kept the spirit of the form intact. So that was enough to do every activity. So there's such great mysteries and the great work. Her descent into inconscience, maybe tomorrow we'll read a little bit of that, where all is won or all is lost for man. Now her whole avataric aspect, Narad is revealing to us, or Sri Aurobindo is revealing to us through the lips of Narad. In that tremendous silence, lone and lost, of a deciding hour in the world's fate, in her soul's climbing beyond mortal time, when she stands soul with death or soul with God. This is what we read. She says, on one side, death. On the other, she said, it's entirely up to the Supreme Lord. Nobody else has any say now. Soul with death or soul with God. Apart. And this experience doesn't come later on anywhere in the agenda. It's not 70, 71, 72. It's a different thing altogether. That was a different work. Some other time, maybe we can speak about it. Apart upon a silent, desperate brink, alone with herself and death and destiny, as on some verge between time and timelessness, when being must end, or life rebuild its base. Alone she must conquer, or alone must fall. This whole thing we read exactly this way. No human aid can reach her in that hour. No armored god stands shining at her side. And it's amazing that, she knew those who were actually, she has later elaborated about it. It was literally black magic, a tantric yagna that was being done. It's all documented. She knew the people who are doing it. And she goes through that whole state. And all these people were ultimately guided by this false Sri Aurobindo. And she says, I accepted him also because of the Lord's infinity. Who can, do this? Cry not to heaven, for she alone can save. For this the silent force came mission down. In her the conscious will took human shape. This is the avatar. The avatar is the will, the only will which is supremely conscious. All other wills, human wills, godlike wills, are partially conscious and covered. But the supreme will, which is all conscious, when it takes a human shape, it is the avatar. Mother speaks of this in volume 10 of Collected Works, Commentaries on Thoughts and Aphorisms. And she says what in India is called as incarnations or the great descents. And she says, I can see why they speak about turning to the incarnate God and He will do everything. For instance, said in the Bible that I am the path and I am the way. I am the goal. And similarly we see Shri Krishna says, Aham tvav sarva papebhyo mokshishyami masucha. How can they say with such absoluteness? Sri Aurobindo and the mother, such great absoluteness. So she says, when the central will takes one human body, then all that is offered to that body and all that comes through this body is given to everybody. So it becomes a shortcut. Normally also this will is there, but from behind it's operating through the clash and strife of life. As Sri Aurobindo says, hidden by the Yog Maya. This action of the will takes place in the world and therefore there is much chaos. But sometimes this will, which is deep behind in all of us, suddenly comes in the forefront of the human evolutionary journey and becomes a Christ, a Krishna, a Buddha, or a Sri Aurobindo. So this will has taken a conscious shape. She only can save herself and save the world. Oh Queen, stand back from that stupendous scene. Don't try to change it. That's why Bhishma was very smart, very knowledgeable fellow. People said, why did you fight? You knew that Krishna is God. He said, that's why I fought. I knew that 100 Bhishmas still he will win. So why did you fight? I wanted to do my own bit. What was his bit? To help the Pandavas by being the chief Senapati of Kauravas. Because he had given a strange condition. He said, I am not going to kill a single Pandava and I will kill these many soldiers per day. And I will not allow Karna to fight under my banner. Now what else could you want? Best, they could have no better chief commander than him. So he said, I know anyways that, he has made the whole play and he is going to win. He was a Jnani. That's why at the end, Krishna tells Arjuna, take some wisdom from him. Yudhishthira, take some wisdom from him about Raj Dharma. He knows how to do things. Vidur also knows that now that Krishna has decided, nobody can change it. That will cannot be altered. No, so he says, Queen, if you want to aid, you cannot aid. If you want to change the course, you cannot change. So what is best? He is giving the counsel that Vidur followed. Stand back from this mighty strife. Come not between her and her hour of fate. Her hour must come and none can intervene. Think not to turn her from her heaven-sent task. Strive not to save her from her own high will. Thou hast no place in that tremendous strife. Thy love and longing are not arbiters there. Leave the world's fate and her to God's sole guard. This is what we have to learn. Very difficult. That there is a wisdom that is watching from high and working in the depths. And that wisdom, that will has been embodied consciously, has taken a conscious shape to guide the next millennium. And it will work towards it. Despite everything, and love and death will both become helpers, instruments. This side and that side, they will both become instruments of a grand design. This is how this will operates. It doesn't operate in terms of participating here and not participating. It uses everything. Everything will end up fulfilling that great work for which that will has taken the shape. So it's very interesting. Again and again, the Mahabharata scene keeps coming to my eyes. That we see this actually enacted there, where both side Krishna works, and he ensures that, even though Pandavas have won, but many of them die even on this side, and that was also necessary. That was part of the work. So he puts mighty opponents on both sides. If he really wanted to make them win, and he was God incarnate, he should have done some magic and made all the good people this side and bad people that side. No. So there's a story that Arjuna's son through Ulupi, Barbaric, he comes. And he is a great warrior and knows all the occult powers. And he says, oh, these Kauravas, they are threatening my father. I alone will finish them off. I just need a few moments. One arrow, they will all be under sammohana, hypnotized. The second one, I will finish them. So before he can do anything, Krishna finishes him. So they don't understand. He said, why? What a great opportunity. Because everybody feels that we think God wants us to win. It's not about winning and losing at all. There is another game which is going on. It's not about winning and losing. So then Krishna says, you will get it later. So he keeps that head hanging on a place, and that head has seen everything. And at the end it says, laughs. He says, I saw Krishna on both sides. And then Krishna reveals the mystery that there were many on this side who were also drunken with pride. They also had to be destroyed. Both sides were instruments. What about Drupad? What about Virat? Many of them, great heroes, they had also to go. So it's a play staged by him, where it's not just about this side and that side, but a total picture which evolves through that. Even if he seems to leave her to her lone strength, even though all falters and falls and sees an end, and the heart fails, and only our death and night, God given her strength can battle against doom. Even on a brink where death alone seems close, and no human strength can hinder or can help. This is a simple answer in Savitri to the great mystery of 17th November. People often, have a tendency to blame this person, that person. Who could help or hinder that moment? So she says very clearly, on a brink where death alone seems close and no human strength can hinder or can help. That moment is beyond all that we can conceive or imagine. It is happening on a different plane, at a different point, where extinctions verge. There are two points which are perilous, where there is extinction. One is on the highest heights where form melts into the formless, infinite. And that is described in Savitri in Pursuit of the Unknowable, where everything must finish or be reborn, otherwise it finishes. Nothing can stay there. And the other is where the form disintegrates into the other side of the formless infinite. Both sides it's a formless infinite. On this side the luminous infinite, and here the dark infinite. In between is the play of forms. That's all the drama is about. It emerges from the formless infinite and takes a form. That is the perilous verge, extinction's verge. And yogis know how to cast themselves into that and finish. But there is another perilous verge which great yogis have also not touched, where the forms disintegrate and again enter into a formless state, but in the inconscient. It's a very dangerous thing to grow there. It's cautioned there are books of ancient yoga where among the 6 types of samadhi, one of them is called caste samadhi, where you can enter into a state of inconscient, and if you die at that point, you don't go in, merge into the absolute. You start like that typical snake and ladder Ludo. You start from zero again. The whole evolutionary journey has to be started. It's a very dangerous point, because you have chosen, you have cast yourself into that night of God, and it's finished. So that's why these things are so dangerous. Think not to intercede with the hidden will. Intrude not twixt her spirit and its force, but leave her to her mighty self and fate. So that verge where none goes, because if you go there, you enter into that realm from where you can't return. But there is also that point from where you can't return, but that's a freedom, mukti. Here it's another kind of freedom from where you have to come back again and retrace the whole thing. Mother has gone there. And how she has gone, that also she recounts beautifully in her experiences. Several times she has gone into the inconscient. She says that I have gone into that. She was prepared for this work. She is the one who is missioned for this work. And she says that also. Oh yes, this is the one. Let me put a mark. Then we can read. So she first gives a background that when she came from Japan and this early 20s, Mother and Sri Aurobindo started supramentalizing the mind. So that was easy. Then they supramentalized the vital. That was also fairly easy, and mothers became very young, started doing interesting things. Then they came into the physical and obscurities arose. That time we'll see a lot of letters of disciples and saying, I feel dull, I feel tamasic, I feel divine is far and veiled. And he would say, yes, yes, I know. It is the condition of everybody because sadhana has taken a plunge into the physical. From there they went into the subconscious and the inconscient, where the real battle was waging. And that's what she describes. And then the trouble began. And then this she says that she went down and discovered there the divine presence in the heart of darkness. This wasn't the first time. When I was working with Theo, the second time I was there, I once descended into the total unindividualized, that is general inconscient. Total. And there I suddenly found myself in front of something which opened like a vault or a grotto. Of course, it was something like, and there I saw a being of irised light, reclining with his head on his hand, fast asleep. We read in Indian mythologies that all avatars are avatars of Vishnu. Vishnu is shown in the heart of the infinite time, evolutionary serpent unfolding itself. He is lying at the heart asleep. And out of him emerges Brahma with the word of creation. She says, I went there to find the mantra of life from where creation emerges. It was the immanent God in the depths of the inconscient. I have experienced the descent into the inconscient many times. See, making it appear so casual. It's like taking a stroll. It happened quite frequently. I had the experience of being missioned, so to speak, in a form of love and consciousness combined, emanated directly into the nethermost depths of the inconscient. So she remembers, that's when she knew her mission. What is her mission? The work. And then now she describes this being. Standing there between two iridescent pillars is a very tall figure. His face, framed in short blonde curls, is that of a very young man. His eyes are sea green, is clad in a pale blue tunic, and the wings upon his shoulders are great fins, white as snow. We know the first avatar in Indian myths is Matsya avatar, white as snow with fins. She's going deeper and deeper inside the sea. Beholding me, he steps aside against a pillar to let me pass. Barely have I crossed the threshold when an exquisite melody strikes my ears. The waters are all iridescent here, the ground aglow with lustrous pearls, opaline, the portico and vault, hung gracefully with stalactites, delectable perfumes over everywhere. Galleries, niches and alcoves open out on all sides. This in the depths of the unconscious, he has pierced the bottomless pit and she finds this being there. But directly ahead of me, I perceive a great light and towards it I bend my steps. There are broad rays of gold, silver, sapphire, emerald, and ruby, radiating outward in all directions. Born from a center too distant for me to discern. To this center I feel drawn by a powerful attraction. Now I see whence these rays emanate. I see a recumbent oval of white light girdled by a superb rainbow. Rainbow is again the evolutionary energy. The one in manifold colors is revealing himself. And I sense that the one whom the light hides from my view is plunged in a profound repose. He is already described with his head on his hand. He is plunged in a profound repose. For long, I remain at the outer edge of the rainbow, trying to pierce the light and see the one who is sleeping girdled by such splendor. She described it literally going into waves, water, deep, deep below into the water. I enter the rainbow and thence into the white and shining oval. Here I see a marvelous being, stressed on what seems to be a drift of white eiderdown. His supple body of incomparable beauty is clad in a long white robe. His head rests on his folded arm. But of that I can see only his long hair, the hue of ripened wheat. What a wonderful description and darshan in his own way. Flowing over his shoulders, a great and sweet emotion sweeps through me at this magnificent spectacle, and a deep reverence as well. Has the sleeper sensed my presence? For now he awakens and rises in all his grace and beauty. This was her work, to wake him up, the God who sleeps in the inconscient depths. He turns towards me and his eyes meet mine, mauve and luminous eyes, with a gentle and infinitely tender expression. Wordlessly he bids me a sublime welcome, and my whole being joyously responds. Taking my hand, he leads me to the couch he has just left. I stretch out on this downy whiteness, and his harmonious visage bends over me. A sweet current of force enters wholly into me, invigorating, revitalizing each cell. This is where she becomes fully conscious of the avataric missions. He speaks about that. That evolutionary being, the one, he fuses into her. Says, this is the work that I've been doing, so that will has to now emerge, charged with that destiny. Then, girdled by the splendid colors of the rainbow, enveloped by lulling melodies and exquisite perfumes, beneath his gaze so powerful, so tender, I float into a beautiful repose. And during my sleep, I learn many beautiful and useful things. Now comes something very beautiful. Of all these marvelous things understood without the noise of words, I mention only one. This is an amazing thing to carry in the heart. Wherever there is beauty, wherever there is radiance, wherever there is progress towards perfection, whether in the heaven of the heights or of the depths, there assuredly is found the form and similitude of man, supreme terrestrial evolution. So this is wherever there is beauty, a beautiful thought, a beautiful feeling, a beautiful act, urge for progress, radiance, light, that is where evolution is happening. And she gives man that he is the one who is the bridge. He is the one who is destined to be the evolutionary link. And it is remarkable, Mother concludes, that this marvelous being strangely resembles him whose vision I had one day, the being who is found at the other extremity, at the borderline of the form and the formless. The Vedas speak about it in a very interesting word. Rodasi, two rivers between which creation flows. The Vedic rishis speak about it. They have this word, Rodasi. Sri Aurobindo describes, explains this word at great length. Says the same being, only the latter was in golden glory, carmine, while in its sleep, this other being was diamond white, emanating opalescent rays. That, in fact, is the origin of all avatars. So this is the moment when she becomes aware of her mission. This is when she was in Algeria, much before coming here. That is why when she came here, Sri Aurobindo could see all this, that she is the one. He has used the word. She is the one. Just as he said, he is the one. When he saw the mother, he said, he did not say or write that time, she is the one for whom we have waited. And she has come. Now she has come and all will surely change. This is the anthem. This is the story of Savitri, the story of the Divine Mother. Last 6 lines and we will close with that. It's a very beautiful. So going through death, see the book of fate ends with so much beauty. It starts with literally death and cruel fate and ends where? He spoke, Narad spoke. He spoke and ceased and left the earthly scene. Away from the strife and suffering on our globe, he turned towards his far-off, blissful home. A brilliant arrow pointing straight to heaven, the luminous body of the ethereal seer assailed the purple glory of the noon and disappeared like a receding star, vanishing into the light of the unseen. But still a cry was heard in the infinite, and still to the listening soul on mortal earth, a high and far, imperishable voice chanted the anthem of eternal love. And when I read this, after this description, I felt, Sri Aurobindo has revealed everything, his own mystery. He put the mother in front, made it very clear. She is the one who will fulfill the yoga of transformation. She has to stand one day on extinction's verge, carrying the world's destiny in her heart, like Narada he prophesied. And then he ascended to the blissful home. Of course, he is here on earth, but look at the image. But he left something for us very beautiful. The anthem of eternal love, which still chants and reverberates in the earth's atmosphere and in the secret chambers of our soul. And that anthem of eternal love is what else but Savitri. So this way, stop today and conclude tomorrow. Tomorrow is the last session. It will be one single session.